And welcome back. If you've been watching all day during the legislative session this year or last year, you know that we like to pull back the curtain on what's happening there and listen in on a lot of those live conversations that are ultimately going to shape our new laws. This past week, we heard quite a bit of testimony around things like AI, specifically chatbots and kids. Should municipalities be allowed to enter into non-disclosure agreements when considering new business in the area, things like data centers? Self-driving cars, even the expiration date on eggs. And we thought that was plenty to talk about. And there's one lawmaker who's behind all of those bills. She joins me now, DFL Senator Erin Quade. Thanks for spending some time with us on this Friday.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's dive in. Let's talk about the two letters that make people really anxious, AI. You're trying to curb some very specific concerns when it comes to chatbots and minors. Is that right?
Yes, I have a bill that would prohibit minors, well, it would prohibit companies from making chatbots available to minors. So it wouldn't prohibit, young people from using AI for, homework or research tools, but it's the conversational nature that is both addictive and harmful. And I want companies to not make that available to minors anymore.
And for those who may not know, because again, this technology is changing so fast, when you talk about a chatbot, can you explain a scenario where a chatbot might be interacting with a minor in kind of more of a recreational way?
Sure. So I think the one that probably has the most colloquial understanding would be ChatGPT. So people will, put in a prompt and they can say, how many miles is it from the Earth to the moon? And a Google search, a regular Google search, would just give you the mileage and maybe some additional information about how travel goes from the Earth to the moon. A ChatGPT would say, oh my gosh, that's a great question. You're thinking about the wonderful things of the world. It would give an answer and then it would continue the conversation in some way. And so the difference between, search tools and search functions and chatbots is that they are designed to never end a conversation. They are designed to be engaging in a way that requires you or makes you want to keep coming back. So they ratchet up conversations into boundary pushing, oftentimes sex or disordered eating. It kind of goes and plays with fantasies or suicidal ideation we've seen for kids. That is very detrimental. It's been shown to be detrimental for adults, but it's especially detrimental to the developing brain. And the other thing about chatbots is that they take on human characteristics. So they use pronouns, they express feelings, they express opinions. And it's just a really, really insidious way that inappropriate content is being served to children that would be illegal if it was an adult doing it, but somehow it's not because it's a computer. So I want to put a stop to that.
Is there a challenge in trying to regulate this with the companies, give punishment, consequences? I mean, it's such an overwhelming world.
It is an overwhelming world, and I think it's important for folks to know that there are a number of lawsuits against, ChatGPT, Claude, Character.ai, which is a very, very popular site that young people use to build their own chatbot. So you can pick personality types and characteristics that are modeled after characters that young people know or like or have seen or been exposed to. These lawsuits have been because of pretty serious harm, including death by suicide for these young people. And so there are active lawsuits, but I think it's been 3 years. It's been 3 years since we've had chatbots rolled out. Chatbots are younger than my toddler daughter. This is not something that is so ingrained in society and so necessary in society that we can't say, you know what, we've seen enough evidence to say this isn't safe and shouldn't be available to young people. And there's a whole host of things we have that for in law. This is just one of those as well. This should be anyway.
Aside from the chatbots and minors, was it also this hearing? You'll have to remind me. I remember, and I don't know if it was you, but somebody was talking about being on a call, like on hold or something, and then the agent would come on, and it wasn't a real person, but the agent, you could not get to, and we've all been there, right? Was that you who was talking about that?
That was me. Yep.
Okay, that's what I thought.
It's a bill similar, well, it's not similar to chatbots. It just requires disclosure when you're interacting with AI in a text or oral conversation. So if you call Delta to schedule a flight and they have an AI agent answer the phone, they just have to disclose that. If you're talking to Home Depot's chatbot on the website, it just has to disclose that. And then there has to be a human option at some point. It doesn't mean that you immediately have to be kicked over to a human. It can be an email address or an in-person or someone can call you back. But there are consequences to not having AI that's smart enough to know what people know. And that could be as minimal as I can't return these pants that I ordered that are the wrong size because this AI chatbot doesn't understand that I want to exchange the pant, not return the pant, or vice versa, to something really consequential. Like I can't schedule my cancer treatment appointment because the AI agent doesn't understand that the clinic I want to go to is the one that's closer to my work and not my house, and it cannot schedule that appointment. And we've seen instances of this. So that's why we just want the disclosure.
Yeah, okay. So let's go on to something else that's, I guess, futuristic, but maybe not really. Autonomous vehicles. The day is here. We see them in California, specifically the Waymos. There are bills, it looks like, that are trying to move us closer to fully autonomous vehicles in Minnesota on the street. So how do you feel about that? Where do you stand?
It's interesting. When I was in the House, I actually had proposed a bill to prohibit driverless cars. So it's something I've been against for about 10 years now, and it's for a number of reasons. My bill wouldn't prohibit driverless cars from Waymo entering the market. It would just pause consumer-facing rollout until we have thoroughly studied the issue. We have insight into the algorithm that is driving these cars, that we know that there's safety built in. We've seen Waymo rolled out in hot weather states like California and Arizona. We don't know how Waymo operates in a Minnesota weather. Do they know to steer into the skid? Do they know how much version we have to the zipper merge? There are really specific things about Minnesota and our roads and our driving. And I just am not comfortable rolling out this technology into our state without first saying, is it safe? Is it appropriate? And also looking at the economic impact. There are 100,000 Minnesotans who drive in some form professionally. What would that do to our economy and to our state budget and to our labor market if we put, some percent of 100,000 people out of work? And so I think we should evaluate all those things and decide to let autonomous vehicles into Minnesota as a policy choice and not just have it be something that tech companies foist upon us because they want the shareholder returns, whether it's safe or not.
Okay, let's talk about NDAs. And producer Amber and I have been, this came on our radar, I don't know, maybe a year ago or so as we started doing deeper dives into data centers. And so non-disclosure agreements has really just popped into the forefront here because of the data centers. Basically, it's been legal, right? These have been legal for municipalities to enter into a non-disclosure agreements with companies who are looking at coming into their city or their county, and it just means that these folks who are in the municipality, it's a non-disclosure. You don't have to know how much. You don't have to know, so. This has been an issue, and I remember asking questions about it and saying, well, where would that have to change if it changed? And nobody could really give me an answer. Is it the Attorney General? Is it the legislature? So tell me what's happening here with non-disclosures and your stance on it.
Yeah, so we've seen particular to data center development, and I represent the city of Rosemount. The first hyperscale data center in Minnesota is the Meta Data Center. It's being built in Rosemount, and it was developed under a code name, Project Bigfoot, in the city of Rosemount, until it was announced. So the public found out after it was all agreed to, after all the zoning had been changed, after all the special use permits had been issued, and no resident of Rosemount was able to go to a public meeting and hear about this, learn about this, or find out about this until it was done. And that's because of NDAs. And, I think there's a little bit of a gray area. I would argue that NDAs, of course, are not allowed because we have public meeting laws. We have some pretty robust transparency built into our government process, whether it's at the local level or at the state level. But clearly, cities have been more, afraid to violate NDAs than they've been afraid to violate potential Minnesota law. And so I have two bills. One that would just prohibit municipalities from entering into NDAs when they're spending taxpayer dollars, making zoning changes, making changes through the public process that people are supposed to be involved in. You have to have basic information available. I have a second bill that also says before any municipalities make any changes to zoning or issue issuing conditional use or special use permits for the purposes of building a data center. There's some basic information that has to be public, including, who's building it, who the end user is, where it's going to go, how big it's going to be, sewer, water, electricity usage. And it has to be available to the public 48 hours before a public hearing, and there has to be at least 2 public hearings before anything is changed. And so those 2 bills, I hope, get at the issue because Minnesotans really do expect transparency in their government. And right now they're not getting it, and they're very upset. And it really spans everywhere from, Rosemount, where I represent, to Farmington, to Pine Island, to Hermantown. We've seen this all over the state, and Minnesotans across the political spectrum are pretty upset about the idea that their elected officials or cities are signing NDAs to keep corporate, information secret from the public.
And we did a deep dive into the Hermantown, in particular, St. Louis County commissioners who many residents were, as you said, had that position of, we didn't even get a say in this. I think that, the argument on the other side, of course, is that chambers of commerce, people like that are going to say, well, if we don't do this, somebody else is going to get that income. And this could be a big boon to our economy. Is there a place in the middle where maybe it's not the people in power, the people who have a vote or a say get the information, but maybe it's staffers or others who have that information. But and is there just some sort of middle ground, I'm wondering, where you could get the best of both worlds?
Yeah, I'm not really sure that there's a middle ground for government transparency, right? You either have it or you don't. And I wouldn't want to set up a system where you would have city employees or city staff who have more information than the elected officials who are elected by the public to make decisions on behalf of the public and during the process where there's public input. There's obviously NDAs that are used for things like HR matters or things that are unrelated to changing the conditions of the city you live in or the money that your city spends, that I'm not like opposed to on its face. But I really think we should be asking why the Chamber of Commerce thinks that we need complete secrecy from the public for the public government to change the conditions of the cities we live in for economic development. Because if it's so great, then why would this be happening in secret? And I think the answer to that is that these big tech corporations are not good neighbors. I don't think anyone has looked at Meta over the last 20 years and said, great company, great output, great leader. And so it's no surprise that people don't want Meta as a neighbor in our city. And I think people feel the same way about Amazon. And then there's some places where you have no idea who that end user is going to end up being. And so that secrecy, I think, immediately puts opposition against data centers where it might not totally exist, right? There's some communities who might want a data center, and there's some communities who might not care if there's a data center. No matter what a community's feeling, they deserve input in the public process, and to know that their elected officials and everybody who works for the elected officials are maintaining government transparency throughout the process.
Does the NDA bill, where does it fall? Does it fall along party lines?
No. All of my bills, I'd have to check the Waymo one, but almost all of my bills that deal with AI and tech regulation, including and government transparency, are very bipartisan. And I think that's good. I think people should look at that and say, look, there is common ground, and it's on some fundamental basic principles of data privacy, safety, government transparency. So I think that's a good thing. And there's some opposition, in my own party on some aspects, and there's some opposition from Republicans, but there's also support in my own party, and there's also support from Republicans. So we had our first Erin, Maye, Quade, Steve Drazkowski bill, I think, that has ever existed. And it was my bill on NDAs.
Maybe you guys can head to Sweeney's next and get your free lunch and do that. I think he went with Julia Coleman last week, but maybe he's down for another lunch. Although you guys would be on the same side of the table, right. So you'd have to go. Julia. How about that?
That would be great. We have lunch together all the time in the retiring room.
Well, there you go. Can I ask you about the egg bill? Because when I first saw this, I was like, oh. But then when you see it, you go, huh? Wow. Okay. So tell me about this one.
Yes, another bipartisan surprise. It's the first Maye Quade Westrom bill that's ever existed, Tory Westrom. But so Minnesota is one of the only states that has a prohibition from retailers donating eggs from chickens to food shelves or food banks past their quality assurance date. And that is a bugaboo of state law. The FDA has long said that eggs are fresh and ready to be consumed 3 to 5 weeks past that quality assurance date. And pretty much every state in the country has figured out how to allow retailers to donate those eggs to food banks and food shelves. And so my bill would change the law to allow retailers to make that donation. I have a lot of support from everyone from Second Harvest Heartland to Costco. This will be great at a time when we have 1 in 5 Minnesotans experiencing hunger insecurity or food insecurity and hunger. And eggs is just one of the most in-demand items at food shelves. And so it's a $0 bill that could change a lot of people's lives, and there's a lot of agreement on doing it. So I'm very excited about the bill.
Yeah. How many bills are you authoring this session?
Well, I've had 119 introduced right now. I think come Monday it might be closer to 123. It's a lot of bills. It's a lot
Yeah,
of bills.
put it in context for us. I mean, because it sounds like a lot, right?
It is. And part of it, so some of it is because I'm in the majority and there are twice as many House members as there are senators. And so for every, one of me, there's 2 House members. And so we end up having a lot of bills, especially in the majority. But I am passionate about a lot of things, and I spend a lot of time kind of digging into issues that people bring to me, complex issues, whether it's on tech, AI, disability justice, in food insecurity, literacy. It kind of runs the gamut, but it does require a lot of legislative work. And I spend a lot of time working with my colleagues to garner support and then moving it through the process. So I think last biennium, like 55 or 65% of my bills were signed into law. And that's a tremendous number of bills, but it's a tremendous amount of work.
Before I let you go, I know you need to get going. I have to ask you, because the last time I spoke with you via Zoom, it couldn't have been more than 48 hours after Speaker Emerita Hortman and her husband were assassinated. You were visibly, obviously shaken. Yeah. Nobody really knew what this meant for lawmakers, for the community, for the political climate. So now here we are, in March. How are you doing now?
It's been a really hard, I don't know what, 9 months. I think there's been a lot of changes, right? We have seen that like 70 of my Democratic colleagues, SDFLers, were on that hit list, which was very alarming. I had a resurgence of death threats in September to my family that caused us to have to evacuate our house again. We've just seen so many changes when it comes to safety, and I think there's days where just you're reminded that like things are a little bit less safe than they were before. Certainly our sense of security and safety is been shattered, and so it's been hard. And then coming back into session was really hard too. We honored Melissa and Mark and Gilbert. We got John back, and we got to honor him and Yvette and Hope, and so like that has been good, but I don't know if I've seen the temperature go down, and Operation Metro Surge certainly didn't help. So there's been kind of that community-wide experience of the violence and terror, just average everyday neighbors and Minnesotans on the streets and near our schools and at our daycare. So it's been a hard time, but there's a sense of relief knowing that at a time when we're feeling really disconnected and feeling really urgent, I'm being able to be a lawmaker and do something. So like my daughter goes to a Spanish immersion daycare. We had lots of threats by ICE during Metro Surge, but I'm a mom who's able to introduce a bill to keep ICE out of daycares. And so that has also been something in this time that's been really helpful.
Senator Erin Maye Quade, thanks for spending some time with us today. Get out and enjoy some sunshine this weekend, hopefully.
Thanks. Yes, you enjoy it as well.
All right. Take care. We'll see you.